How long was that? That was 55 minutes of no microphone. Okay, anyway, hi. So today we're talking about this game. This game called Ego in Japanese, Paddock in Korean, and Weiqi in Chinese. And while I was muted, I called it a confusion game, mostly because it is, it was developed sort of along the lines of the ideals espoused by our boy Confucius and his ilk, and Taoism, etc., all that beautiful syncretic religions that existed within the plains in East and Northeast China at the time. Well, at the time, 2,000 years ago, 3,000, 2,500 years ago. Anyway, so this game is actually incredibly easy. 55 seconds of muted mic. Anyway, where was I? Yes, this game is actually incredibly easy. And that's actually why it's so complicated, and why AI had for the longest time issue with getting it developing enough power to beat to beat pros, right? I think it makes kind of sense. Essentially, the rules are really simple. You place your stone wherever you want on the board. It can be here, it can be here, it can be here, it can be anywhere. Really, it doesn't matter, right? And oh no, we don't want to remove. And essentially what happens is, if your stones, let's say stone 16 is surrounded on all 4 sides, so there are no diagonal movements on all 4 sides, like so, it gets taken. And therefore that's where the complexity arises, since, for example, I can now take stone 17, and so whenever you take a stone, you're not allowed to, for example, as black right now, I can't go right back into that field. Oh, you can't see the pop-up. So I have to do something else here. White does something else, and then black can do this. So since white cannot move into this space, white has to play somewhere else. And if black doesn't feel like it and thinks this is worth more, then black can do that, and suddenly, things are fine. Anyway, so where does complexity arise? Well, the winner is the person who, at the end of the game, controls the most territory. And territory is sort of defined in this it's defined fairly strongly, and it is all the area that your guys are surrounding that white cannot live in. But in this case, white could potentially live in here. For example, if we did something stupid as black, let's say we do something, oh, I accidentally didn't do anything stupid. Let's do something stupid as black, and imagine all of white was on. Let's just play it out. Imagine all of white was out here. All of white was out here. So white, if it managed to do anything, can still win all of this simply by being brilliant. And so therefore, territory is not easily held, and you can't just do what I did here, which is, try to surround this little bit and try to win off that, because obviously that's not going to work. So, and by the way, this program is amazing. I love it. And so the game becomes more abstract, right? Like at the beginning, the goal really is to is to hold on to as much territory as possible in order to essentially grab an advantage as you move into wrong one, as you move into sort of the mid game. And so this could potentially be what actually, no, it probably can't. No one would play like that. So by move 8 we would do something like this, and then black going in here would be kind of offensive. So if black did this, then the battles would start. So if black wanted to be a little bit more defensive, black could do something like here, and we can sort of have an idea on what this board looks like, because suddenly oh, this looks like it's potentially white, maybe up here, and then maybe down here, and then this looks like it's black, and then shit can get real. And so there are reasons why black looks slightly more powerful, and that's why black usually takes a handicap. And so that's why the handicap for black, depending on rule sets, is usually something like 5 or 3 of these individual spaces. So that means having the starting move not only gains you a tempo advantage like we would have in chess, but also a actual territory advantage. Yeah, just the territory advantage. And so as a game like this progresses, we start seeing all of these very interesting, actually those moves would never happen. We start seeing really interesting ideas start to appear, and much more abstract ideas, because the game itself is so freeform, right? At any of these moves, I can place a piece in any of these locations, and they would all be legit moves. They would all be legal moves, but they would all be terrible moves. And that brings me sort of back to our discussion about the AI, and why AI has had such trouble really making a good AI for Go. And so, because, as I'm sure everyone can tell, this is, except for one person who I know is going to complain, because of how complex this game is, it becomes more and more difficult for an AI to calculate where each particular move would make sense, and therefore where each particular move should go. So stuff like what I did here, this would never really happen in real life, simply because it's too early to use up all of these lovely little places to how do I say this, for gaining an advantage, right? So for example, black would go here, white might do this, or no, white would do this, and then black would start an attack on a corner, usually something along these lines. And in this case, because white already has a stone here, it would do an attack. But the general understanding of the game, I'm pointing at my screen, which makes no sense. If stone 10 and stone 12 did not exist, white would go somewhere along here, such that they could claim all of this territory. But since stone 10 already exists and stone 12 exists, now 16 can go here with extra pressure on 11, or even 16 can go down here to try to reduce and essentially, I guess in Chinese it will be like 釜底抽薪, which is analogous to saying undermining the position of black, such that black has it's essentially difficult for black to actually make a base here to survive. So in these cases, black usually has to run, and white sort of just goes along with that running, because then white can use this as an opportunity to boost the defense for the north. So let's go back to about here. We'll do this because it's slightly less offensive. Actually, no, we will do this. And then in this case, white goes there because white really likes the corner. And so this is generally accepted as a fairly, actually that's a slow move. We'll do that. As a fairly even outcome. So, but now white is looking and seeing all of this black, especially here, that's getting more and more, or even more black. And so one of the very important things is, what can we do about that? Well, usually corners like this, corners can be taken like this actually quite easily. It's not usually an advantage for white. But in this case, it could be, because you're forcing black away from the corner and therefore reducing its territory. So once this has happened, black does something interesting. Let's say interesting. Yeah, let's say right in the middle, for a variety of reasons, right? So because as white cuts off this corner, suddenly this stone, the original stone 3 that we placed to claim our corner, is not very efficient anymore. But by essentially claiming the middle and 25, what we're saying is, hey, look, I have this advantage in these amounts of stones here, even though, you know, white in the future can do something like 32 or this to cut that off, but I can use this to my advantage to create a large space here. How long have we done this? Oh, wow, okay. And so in the modern game, no one would go on 29. It would be something more aggressive like this, or slightly more defensive, maybe along this line, or maybe down here. But this, I think, highlights very, very clearly the complexity of the game, in that, yes, white gained an advantage here, but that doesn't mean that black doesn't have any way to counter. And we just saw that black has a whole bunch of places it can counter. It can even do something like this, or if it gets crazy, down here or over here, or even just something like this. And so, you know, that this makes it more interesting, since this is a move that's not commonly seen and probably also not optimal. But then again, I'm playing against myself, so it doesn't really matter. I think that's it for today. Since we're already at 15 minutes, we'll actually talk about AI next time, and why AlphaGo managed to beat all of the world's pros with no issue, and what's different between AlphaGo and the heuristic algorithms that were used before, not just in Go, but also to beat Garry Kasparov back in, what year was our boy Garry? 97, 98, something along those lines. Anyway, that's it for today. In conclusion, please download Firefox, and good night.